Hi, everybody. This is Paul Hitchcock. I'm with the asset protection estate planning business planning firm Barth Calderon. And this is our channel, Wealth Protector TV, where we have interesting people doing good work. And certainly, Alexandra Alvarado is one of them. She's Director of Marketing and Education for the American Apartment Owners Association. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Yeah, we've had an alliance for a long time. We know each other well, and your organization is fantastic. And it's a great alliance for us because at our law firm, for those of you who don't know us, we have a lot of rental income property owners as clients all across the country because we're helping them with unforeseen liabilities, asset protection, entity structure, a lot of issues, estate planning, transferring property to the next generation. So we're all about helping owners to guard their properties. And Alexander, your organization does so much good work. And today, the hot topic that you want to bring to the table, something that's kind of rising up again. Let's jump into it.
Yes, yes. So a new report from Chandon Economics has basically shown that rent payments, late rent payments, are on the rise. So we've seen basically since the pandemic, obviously there was like an initial hit, and then people were able to recover with stimulus checks or rent forgiveness and programs like that. And now we're seeing, because of inflation and some other factors that we can go into that I think are behind this, late payments are rising again and now are higher than they were in 2021, which is
Interesting.
when you would think it would have been higher at that point.
Yeah, just a quick question on that because during the pandemic, there was, I think, like temporary laws and rules about not evicting, with late payments and
Yes.
stuff. Did those go away now, or are those still around?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, they have. There are certain moratoriums, like with the LA fires that took place.
Oh,
So in Los Angeles or in certain natural disaster prone places, there might be some due to that. But for the pandemic, not so much anymore. What's really, truly interesting, though, is that that really, I think, has propped up or did prop up a lot of the renters that would have had a hard time paying rent, who would have been evicted
yep,
normally under normal
yep.
circumstances, and they just were not. They were never evicted. They never had to pay back the rent that they owed, and so it seemed like everything was okay on the surface looking at it on paper, but underneath you have to think, well, rent is going to be due eventually, and eventually people are going to have to pay that. And which is another factor that we've seen now, is student loans were paused for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, some of them are still paused to this day, which means that individuals who had student loan debt or were behind on payments even prior to the pandemic didn't have to pay a dime, didn't have to catch up.
Right.
They didn't have to do anything, and it didn't affect their credit. In fact, it was automatic. They didn't even have to opt in for it. It just happened to people with
Mm-hmm.
student loans. So now most of those student loan payments are becoming due or will be due very soon for everyone.
Yep.
There's some court cases kind of holding it up right now. That's causing a little bit more of a delay, giving some student loan holders a little more time. But for the majority of them, that bill has become due. And it's very clear when we're looking at credit reports, because American Apartment Owners Association, we sell credit reports and background screening tools. We're seeing it on our end too, that scores are dropping, and we believe it's to do a lot with the student loan repayments that are coming up.
Very good point. And the issue that you brought here of the rising late payments, what does that lead into? Like what about that? Like what are the issues, the problems or the solutions going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, we have landlords who, many of them listening are active. And so they have, their finger on the pulse of their
Yeah.
own portfolio. And For many of them, especially AAOA members, they're not huge corporate landlords. And
Right,
so
right.
even if just one or two of their tenants are falling behind, that can throw off the entire portfolio and really make it quite difficult, even unaffordable in some cases, for a landlord to be a landlord. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense eventually, especially if you're in a state like California or New York, where it's really difficult to evict tenants. That's where it starts to become, really an issue. And with late payments as well, it's not just that. You're also seeing increased costs to landlords too. Taxes going up, insurance drastically increasing over the last
Mess.
few
Insurance is a mess.
years.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, that's especially if you're, in a fire prone, flood prone, whatever prone area, which seems to be the whole country at this point. There's always a natural disaster somewhere, right?
yeah.
And even if there isn't a natural disaster in your area, just the fact that there are so many more natural disasters happening in the US in the last few years, that affects the entire insurance industry, not just your market. You don't necessarily have to have a fire in your backyard or a hurricane to be affected by this. You don't even have to file a claim. It's just going up for everyone.
Yeah, no, good points. And so with the landlords in your network there, with the rise in late payments, what sort of advice and counsel do you give landlords? I mean, is it landlord attorneys getting involved and telling them what to do? Like, what do you
Mhm.
see as far as, okay, here's how to handle this situation?
Yeah, well, there's certainly some preventative measures that we can get into that I think are going to be your best bet. I mean, by the time they're already missing your late payment, they're getting behind on rent, I should say. It might be a bit too late. You're going through, traditional channels of eviction or
Oh, yeah.
maybe negotiation with that tenant, maybe even cash for keys in some cases where you're literally paying them to leave so
Oh,
you can get a tenant in place. So hopefully it doesn't get to that point. But I do want to talk about some of the preventative measures
yeah,
that we're
please.
seeing here at AAA that are helping. So obviously, background checks always great, credit report always great, but I want to emphasize that it's also what you do outside of that. Are you calling references? Are you making sure that that previous landlord reference has verified that they've been paying on time? Because we see a lot of these cases don't end up in court, right? So how do
Right.
you really know if they were paying rent? The other thing we're seeing as well is, bank account. Um, just do you have enough money in your bank account? That's
Oh, you mean
something that
looking at the
landlords,
financials? Looking at the financials. Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's something that we normally reserve for the mortgage industry, you
Right.
know? And landlords thought, oh, well, it's just a bit much, they're not going to buy the home. We don't need to ask for, the last 90 days bank statements. But now we're seeing and encouraging our members to do that more because it does establish at least that there is a safety net and the credit report's not going to tell you that. So places where maybe landlords might have been a little more relaxed, especially small mom and pop landlords, we are encouraging them to really tighten up their screening a bit more. There's so much data out there, and there's so much you can do to really make sure you have a tenant that can afford it, verifying income. I even talked to a landlord the other day who got on the phone, three-way called their bank to verify the funds. And I
Oh,
said,
wow.
wow, that's aggressive, but I like it because
Yeah.
you can't fake that.
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly, you really can't fake it, right?
Right.
Or you're sitting there in person. You're like, let's call the bank right now and see how much
Yeah.
money you have in your account. Honestly, like people are lying left and right because obviously they need rental housing, but they also can't afford it in a lot of cases because either their wages haven't kept up with market rate rent, or perhaps they think they can afford more house than they can, and then
Yep.
they expect the landlord to just take on that risk.
Yeah.
So it's really, that's number one, screening. I have a couple others if you want me to pause there.
Yeah, absolutely. Love
Okay.
this is great. Yeah.
So that's one. Two is rent reporting. So we saw a rent reporting law, the first of its kind, passed in California this year, which required now most landlords, they have to have over 15 units to offer the tenant the ability to have their rent payments reported to the credit bureau.
Oh,
And
really?
why this is good is because if a tenant opts in, and it's to their benefit because it helps build their credit if they do pay on time, that already is now an incentive for them to pay on time. Now,
Wow.
You can also report debt. So as soon as, a tenant has stopped paying rent, maybe not as soon as, I think you have to wait a little longer, but you can report that to the credit bureau. So in general, reporting the debt, reporting the on-time payments. And what we did was we actually started offering rent reporting. So if you go to aaoa.com under the solutions tab, we now have a rent reporting feature. The nice thing about it is that optionally, you can report negative or missed rent payments, which means if the tenant knows it's going to affect their credit score, they're going to be more likely to pay rent. Now in California, the law, actually, I read the whole law of this rent reporting. It
Oh my
says
Lord.
not a single word about negative. It emphasizes positive, which a lot of attorneys and landlords are taking as, okay, let's not do negative. But I've also seen a couple of attorneys argue as well. Well, it doesn't say you can't do negative,
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah.
so there's definitely a bit of a kind of confusion there in California, but everywhere else in the country, you totally can. And it's not required that you do this in, the other 49 states, but I think it's a good idea anyway. And it's so inexpensive.
Well, let me
And it
ask.
just,
No, I
why
love
not?
it. I love it. Let me ask you a question about that. So the
Mhm.
rent reporting, so does that have to be initiated by the landlord, or can the tenant just do it on their own?
Yeah. Either way,
Oh, they
either
can.
way, it doesn't matter. So the landlord, it's nice when the landlord does it because, the tenant might not know, they might not be educated. And if the landlord wants them to do it, right, when you're going through the lease signing process, you say, oh, by the way, either, we do rent reporting and you have to do it, or you can opt in to do it and pay for it yourself. So if you're going to require them to do it, you would bear the cost. In most cases, that's fair. But you could also have it where it's optional. And, tenants who are good tenants and they're trying to build their credit, they're going to say yes. And that's a green flag. I mean,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
wouldn't you want that? Right. So I
How
think
much is
it's a
it?
good test.
How much is it to do it?
So for the tenant through the service that we have, it's $5 a month for the
Oh, five
tenant.
bucks a month. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then for the landlord, they can pay, I think it's like 250 or so a year, but it includes up to 20 leases the whole year.
So
So,
can the tenant go to your site and just
mhm.
do it on their own and initiate it, and then does the landlord get notified? Are they involved if the tenant initiates it?
Yeah, so they would be. There would be an invite sent to either party. So whoever initiates it, that would trigger an invite to the other party to
Got
agree
it.
to it.
Okay.
So that has to happen first. However, I will say if you are reporting a debt, so if the tenant has left and they still owe you money, you do not need to ask them permission to report that.
Okay.
It's really only if you want to report, and this is strange. It's only if you want to report positive. That's when either party would need to get permission from the other to do so. But once it's done, it's automatic. It'll just keep reporting positive automatically, unless you as a landlord go in and intentionally mark it as a negative, or they move out and you mark a debt. Then in that case, you would have to do something. But once you do it, it's set it and forget it. It auto does the whole billing and everything. And the cool
Wow.
thing is if they do miss and you mark a negative, it starts sending them warnings and notification emails that are like automated. So it's kind of like a
That's
scary
cool.
email to
Yeah.
the tenant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
that helps also the tenant say, oh, this landlord is serious.
yeah,
They're going to do
totally.
something about this. I better figure out how I'm going to pay this rent before it affects my credit more.
Well, what if the tenant wants to do it and the landlord doesn't? And because the landlord says, "Well, I don't want to pay 250 bucks a year," because if the tenant initiates it, it means the landlord's got to pay something,
Yeah.
right?
No, the tenant
No?
would pay if they initiate it.
Oh,
So
if
if the
they
tenant's
initiate,
paying,
oh,
they're paying $5 a month. Yeah.
oh, so it's not another
The
250 a year.
right,
Oh,
right.
oh, got it,
The
got it, got it.
landlord
Okay.
only needs to pay that if they wanted to buy it in bulk and
Oh,
either resell it to their tenants, or if they wanted to, do any sort of debt reporting or negative reporting, the landlord would have to pay for that.
okay.
But if the tenant is doing it, it would be positive reporting. They would pay for it. the landlord will sign off on it. That's basically how it works. But I think, for a tenant, it's so affordable. But what's funny to me is that tenants still don't know about it. So they
No.
created this law that's supposed to benefit tenants, and that was the whole point. And so many people don't know about it yet. And so
Yeah.
I think it's really up to landlords to tell their tenants and explain to them the benefits. And that is required now by law. You do have to offer it, right? So if you make it, if you pose it in the right way, give them a good letter with all of their, rights, and then why this is important for them, they're more likely to sign up for it. And I think that's to a landlord's benefit for sure, especially if they're paying for it, why not?
Totally, totally. Okay, great point. All right. I think, do you have point three?
I do. Of course. You can't just do two things, Paul. You have to
No,
have three. It's like the
exactly.
magic number,
It
right?
is trifecta, trifecta.
Okay, so the third one is lease insurance.
Mm,
So this means getting some sort of protection on the lease agreement itself. So we have one called lease guarantee that's included with our screening reports. We also work with the guarantors, which is a company that started a while back. And they specifically like to do lease insurance products for individuals who don't have a social, for those who are self-employed, for those who are students. Paul, you're telling me you're young college students, right? Who's going to rent to
right,
them?
right.
So they
Nobody.
might list you as the co-signer,
Oh yeah.
but they can also, instead of using you, they could use the guarantors, and they actually act like a co-signer. So does the lease guarantee product in what we have. And essentially, if a tenant starts falling behind, this third party company kind of steps in and talks to them. Hopefully it doesn't end up in court, but if it does, you do get a payout for that through lease guarantee, which is the AAA product. And with the guarantors, they have a claims process and whatnot, but they'll pay you out for that missed rent, and typically the tenant pays. So in most cases, you have a high risk tenant, you say, great, I'd love to rent to you. However, I'm going to need you to buy this lease insurance because you're a
Okay.
high risk renter. And the lease insurance rate will usually be maybe like 1 month rent upfront. So you can do that instead of a security deposit or in addition to one. And that really helps if something does go wrong, to then use the policy if you need to. So,
Got it.
and it doesn't have to cost the landlord anything either. Again, it's optional. Does the landlord want to pay it? Does the tenant want to pay for it? That goes for screening, that goes for rent reporting, that goes for lease insurance. So
Okay.
you could literally have three more layers of protection on your rental for $0. All you have to do
Oh,
is convince your tenants to do it. And I think most of them will, because a lot of them are looking to rent, and there are some competitive markets, and they know they have bad credit, or they know they might not have enough income. So they might, go along with some of these requirements. And I think more landlords are doing it anyway. So it's smart to get on board now and not wait until, you get that missed late payment.
and folks, this is why you want to join AAOA. Become a member for this reason alone. There's so much great information. And I want to say before I forget, wherever you're watching this, because we live stream this everywhere, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, I think, that Alexandra's information is going to be around this, and check them out and get on there. My information will be around there also. Barth Calderon. You can figure out what we do, and we have complimentary assessments on our end. Alexandra, I know you would love to have anybody come on board there. A lot of resources.
Yes, absolutely. You can join for free. So our association has 155,000 members nationwide. You can become 155,001 if you want to join for free.
Woo!
Uh, we also have plenty of free resources, our newsletter, magazine, blog. Like Paul said, we're really invested in educating our members. And if you did want to purchase screening or lease guarantee or rent reporting, we have that on our site too. And definitely check it out. You have nothing to lose there.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks,
Yeah.
Alexandra. Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for having me.
All right.